Good afternoon. Welcome to the Business Regeneration and Planning Overview and Scrutiny panel meeting. In the absence of the Chair and Vice Chair, who have both submitted apologies, the first order of business will be to elect a Chair for this meeting. So if we could have a proposal. Councillor Hartshorn is proposed.
Martin Walsh, as the previous Chair of the committee, I feel is uniquely suited to take over proceedings tonight. Do I have a seconder for that?
Yeah, and reserve my right to speak if necessary. Thank you.
Take the chair, please. Thank you. Oh, yes, sorry. We need to vote, please, from all Business Regeneration and Planning members.
All those in favour?
Right, that's...
Any against? Abstentions?
One abstention, so that's carried. So, Councillor Walsh, if you'd like to take the chair, please. Thank you.
Okay, good evening, everybody. As we said, we have two apologies. Councillor Clark and Councillor Phillips. We have Councillor Brown substituting for Councillor Clark. Thank you, Councillor Brown. But no substitution for Councillor Phillips. Okay, thank you very much. I'm sure we all know the evacuation procedures, etc. As there's no member of the public here tonight, just remind you that this meeting is being recorded but not live streamed at the moment. And please can you ensure your phones are switched to silent or off? Thank you. You should have before you the minutes of the previous meeting as of the 7th of December. Can I have a proposal of those be true and accurate record thereof? Thank you, Councillor Hartshorn. And a second. Thank you, Councillor Morton. I shall sign those off. Thank you. Okay. As we have no members... any declaration of interest other than this already stated in the agenda? I'm seeing nothing. That's fine. Thank you very much. Again, public consultation, we don't have any members of the public. Oh, okay, yes, Councillor, sorry. Councillor Condacor. You wish to speak on item 7 and 8? Yes. Shall we? We'll hold that back until that was time of the agenda, if that's okay with yourself. Thank you. Okay, that's item number 6. Questions to Cabinet members. We do have two members of the Cabinet here, thank you, Councillor Smith and Councillor Wilson. Thank you. Do we have any questions from the members to the members of the Cabinet, please? Councillor Wright, thank you.
Update us as to the status of the former Woolworths site. Thank you.
The lease was actually signed over to Wilko's prior to their insolvency, just at the latter end of last year, and it is still with the administrators to decide what they do with the lease. It is something that I have been pushing on with the team, because obviously that does lose us an income because of the estimated rate, but we are legally tied into that lease, so at the earliest opportunity we can escape the lease, or they will surrender the lease. We will do so and put it up on the market to try and get it occupied as soon as possible. But it is sadly tied out of our hands. We are tied at the moment, as much as I would love to be able to do more with the site, because we were looking forward to Wilko's going in, and at the time we didn't foresee their collapse.
Questions for Cabinet members? I'm seeing no. Okay, thank you very much for that. We shall continue then on item number 7, biodiversity offsetting monies within the 106 legal agreements. And I ask the Assistant Director for Planning. Thank you.
To go through the report in fine detail. Hopefully you'll agree it's a very thorough and detailed report produced by my team member. You'll be aware that obviously biodiversity offsetting is gaining more traction in the planning process. As an authority, we have been operating no net loss in terms of biodiversity on development sites since the existing local plan was adopted in 2019. You'll also be aware that emerging government guidance that is coming into force this year is actually moving towards 10% biodiversity net gain, firstly on major sites and then looking at small sites as well. Obviously, the purpose of this report is to look at the money that we've had in from developers in terms of biodiversity net gain and where that money is being spent and plans for where that money will be spent in the future. Just to say that obviously the first aim of the legislation is that offsetting should always be on site where possible, and that is the first point. But as you can imagine, for some sites that's extremely difficult to actually do that, and also you need to take account of the sort of variations in the offsetting required. So we do have to look at, as we have been doing, taking financial contributions and spending them on biodiversity net gain. There has been some resource and capacity issues for the for the Borough Council in actually doing that, because it's all well and good. Developers are very happy to basically hand over money and get their planning permission and meet their commitments, but it's then being left to the Borough Council to resource spending that money. You'll see that, you know, there are various projects going on, and I'll have to be honest with you, obviously the Parks team lead on those projects, so I don't know the absolute detail of all those projects. But I think from my perspective, I've been working very much with Kevin Hollis to look at what we might do in the future as well in terms of joining up with partners like Warwickshire County Council and the Wildlife Trust, because we do need that extra capacity to help us spend this money in the right places in the future. And I wasn't intending to say anything else, but obviously open to questions, but just bear in mind, if it's a really detailed one about a specific site, I might have to come back to the individual member, if that's okay, Chair.
Well, this is obviously for noting, but are there any questions relating to the report? Councillor Cape.
Keep me, sorry?
Okay. All right. Okay. So, Councillor Cape.
Committees. And I do feel quite, the only reason I'm here tonight with the stuff that's going on with my mum, etc., is because I felt so strongly about the initial issue that was raised. And anything that I do say or ask is only to try to get robust and sound processes moving forward for the future. It is not to criticise any department, any individual, or anything like that. However, if we go to 2.1, the purpose of it and what we can influence, and that's on page 13 of the report, and then paragraph 4.1, this is effectively why I raised the question in the first place, because sitting on the planning committee as well, I have often seen biodiversity offers from the builders, the 106 monies, which we then monitor on a different panel, and then the biodiversity on this one. And it was my concern that things were actually slipping through the gaps. Moving on to the report on the OWL site, which I do have questions on, it then became clear that things historically had slipped through gaps under previous administrations and under previous personnel. So that's just setting the scene before I ask a couple of questions, if that's okay. Right. If we take the OWL site as a specific, I've got to say that I do know the site, and that's why I raised the issue initially. I believe there are still £25,000 of funds that were collected in 2020 that have not been allocated to that site. So my first question would be, why has it not been allocated to works that need to be done there, and when might this happen? I realise that's not your remit, but it's one that I perhaps would like a question answered in writing following on from this. Secondly, on that particular site, there was mention made that the builders were supposed to provide 2 pools. In fact, 1 pool was already existing, and there's just a sentence that says the pool failed. But why? And if it was a requirement for the builders to actually make that good, why were they not held to it? The reason that the pool seems to have failed is that the existing pool that has been there for about 20 years was actually clear lined to start with, and the people put some care in to make it sustainable. Whereas it seems that all the builders did here was dig a big hole and hope for the best. There was no follow-up on its failure. Additionally, there is mention of Boroughs, composting sites, bat boxes, bird boxes, all going to be supplied. And yet, if you go to the site and have a look, there are currently only 1 or 2 that are in a very dilapidated state. A lot of existing boxes have been removed, stolen, I don't know what. And indeed, even some of the signage that used to be in existence on the site that said, here is a clay pool that has been in existence for whatever, because it wasn't maintained, that's been ripped up and thrown away somewhere. So the whole place is just disintegrating, when these biodiversity funds and the commitments of the builders should have actually improved it. But nothing has been done, and in the 10 years that I've known that area, it's just got worse. And indeed, residents have said to me, what's going on? And I don't have an answer for them. So I think there are certainly lessons to be learnt there, and I know that in the report it also says that it was a learning process. Well, of course, learning processes are good, but only if you actually put the faults right. So what is going to be done on that site to put the faults right? There endeth my sermon.
If you could, Maria, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, we're all aware that there has been issues not only with monitoring and enforcement of biodiversity issues, but parks and open spaces as well. One of the reasons why I was able to recruit to the vacant planning enforcement post, because I only had 1 planning enforcement officer up till a few months ago, was that enforcement officer would be employed to actually start looking at some of these wider issues that cut across planning and our park service. He is really, really enthusiastic about it. We've started to begin with. We've started on the open spaces because you're probably aware we've had this issue where open spaces have not been coming over to us because they have not been fit for purpose for us to take on. We are making great inroads in a couple of sites that we're really showing by example that we mean business. The next stage of that is to move on to the biodiversity side of things. The enforcement officer has had some training. I'm waiting for some capacity in parks, but that is a big part of his remit, that we will actually be enforcing the biodiversity side of things, and that's a big part of his job for the future.
Brought in might assist in that, and that we're actually leading other authorities in that area, which is all positive. I think I'm going back to my first point again. I just think there needs to be a way that the organisation can put in place a robust synergy between the different oversight panels in order that we can trace these things through. Because if I didn't visit that site, I wouldn't know, and this problem might not have been escalated.
Do you need to respond on?
I think I have questions there, Councillor, about a particular site, so I'll take those away and get an answer for you. And I think, obviously, from an officer perspective, the restructure in terms of, just the fact that parks and planning are in the same directorate now, it is the way we are moving forward to ensure that we're not working in silos anymore and that we're using resources effectively.
that of taking this sort of joint report forward to further meetings is advantageous, so we can get responses from two parts, two different overviews, committees. That's a good idea. Thank you. Councillor Condacor.
But because it's a problem all over the place. We have developers that put pretty diagrams in and then things are either not delivered on their site or not delivered off-site. A couple points I wanted to make. One is obviously the adoption of open spaces has been really slow, and if I put a members' inquiry system in, I can just get another message saying it's all running late. But actually the sites that are pre-borough plan approved haven't got much biodiversity or offsetting on their open spaces, but they provide us with land which we can plant trees or have wildflower meadows or whatever. So before the rules came in, there's a lot of sites that have a lot of grassland, and they are actually areas we could actually introduce some biodiversity on some of the more bland new sites, but they're new, but they're approved pre-2019. So I hope that's going to be pushed forward. I was very interested in the interesting bits about ponds, because wetlands are really, really valuable. And we have a problem with lots of our first wins on biodiversity are flower meadows, and that's only part of the ecosystem of everything. So I want our biodiversity offsetting to provide a mixture of different habitats, because obviously having one habitat doesn't make an ecosystem. So we really need to be looking at wetland features. This is where the Wildlife Trust and people can really help us if we can get money flowing to them. And particularly in Weddington, we have a lot of wet areas which actually have very low value nature-wide at the moment, because they're just ditches going down, whereas the Wildlife Trust can actually put little balancing ponds by them and actually nature them up a lot more. So I really like some commitment going forward that we actually invest in wetlands and also in woods, because apart from the Arbory estate, a lot of the borough, particularly at my end of the borough, is very deprived of trees. And we're building out to Weddington, we're building out into Bulkington, Whitestone. Having trees in those areas provide us not only with biodiversity, but help with the flood mitigations and all sorts of other issues, and mental health, and just generally raise the spirits. And the wildflower meadows are there in the spring and have their cycles, but the stuff needs to have other stuff in other than just trees, wildflower meadows. So can we emphasise diversity in our biodiversity offsetting?
Thank you.
As officers, and there has been some consultation with Councillor Smith and Councillor Guttridge on a Warwickshire Natural Capital Investment Strategy, which obviously covers all those things you've raised, Councillor, that we need to be looking at those things. And obviously we are quite lucky in Warwickshire in that we are ahead of the game in terms of what else is being done across the country. We've got people that work at Warwickshire County that have been involved in national policy on biodiversity. So we are in a good place to actually take this forward, and there will be further reports on that coming through to members in the future.
Doing this stuff, and can I ask it goes to obviously the two committees are meeting jointly today. Can I ask it is tabled to the Environment, Health and whatever it is committee as soon as you start developing it, so we make sure we get a good input from the Nuneaton Bedworth. We're the smallest land area in Warwickshire, and we've got very little land that hasn't been built on, so I think we need to get in early with this process and grab some of the funding and the trials, particularly if we're trying to do Warwickshire wildlife stuff, that we don't have Stratford and Warwick having lots of wildlife and us being missed out.
Just Bedworth are at the top of the pile on this, because we have been the ones that have been really leading on progressing this, so just to reassure you.
Yeah, so about working with developers to highlight the sites, even if they're not necessarily on the site themselves able to do that, but where there could be suitable sites nearby or in an immediate geographical radius. So, for example, myself and Maria had a meeting with a developer a few weeks ago about someone who wanted to bring business into the borough, and they are struggling to find something on the immediate site, but we are trying to point them in the right direction. I haven't commented on the application itself, but said because some of these people don't have the local knowledge of us as local councillors or officers about saying, have you considered X site or Y site, or Y site, which is just down the road or not, you know, a million miles away, where we could potentially get some investment into those sites to increase biodiversity. So I think it's not necessarily saying all development is bad. Let's not talk to them even as councillors or as officers, but saying, actually, if this is going to happen, these are the sites where you might be able to get some improvement as part of the biodiversity net gain. And actually, it was quite pleasing to see they were willing to work with us, actually, to talk about that, rather than just try and stonewall us. They were trying to be proactive with us as well about the principle of biodiversity net gain. We didn't comment on the actual application, because that's got to go through, but the principle of the biodiversity itself, I think we need to engage in more of those conversations with developers so that we start at the very beginning to try and get the plan right, rather than think of it as an afterthought.
I think the other point was, because it's not just about the developers passing the money over to us, it's about them actually helping us to deliver. And I think that was key in the meeting we had. We got across to them, we can't just have, we might identify a site that we think is appropriate, but we haven't got the capacity to deliver. So you're going to have to put into that delivery as well. So it's right, it is, and I think obviously it's helped. It is going to help more and more with the national legislation coming in, because as I say, with us having no net loss, we're ahead of the game anyway. Obviously, for those authorities that have not been doing this, that are going to have 10% net gain on them in the next few days, really, it's going to be quite a steep learning curve. So we are at the forefront of what we're doing.
Yeah, that's very, very good to hear. And it's good to hear that we're looking at the bigger picture and putting the onus onto the developers, not just taking the money from them, let them be involved and say, make it work, and not just say, thank you very much, here's your money, and leave it down to us. Thank you. In which case, I will just, we're noting that report and move forward. Oh, sorry, Councillor Wright, sorry.
And a number of councils have achieved positive results using a more light touch approach to grassland management, no mow may as it's sometimes called. Now obviously there are some areas which need to be kept short for amenity purposes, no one's disputing that, but there are other areas which seem to be cut unnecessarily early and unnecessarily often for, as far as I can see, no reason other than habit. Would you agree with that?
Planning. I am aware that there are, within the report, there is mention of where areas have been left. Obviously, there's also mention in the report of residents' expectations as well, but it's not one that unfortunately I can answer myself. I think it would be Councillor Guttridge would probably be best placed to answer that.
Mowing stuff in planning applications and areas that aren't mowed, there is a planning issue, and actually trying to have some of our sites not over mowed when we get them handed over might be a useful thing that is more of a planning remit. And a lot of these no mow areas are actually quite good for biodiversity. We did it ourselves last year, and the amount, when I did mow it eventually, as you mow carefully, slowly, we had quite a few frogs jump out. So I think trying to actually have less mowing as planning applications come in might be a useful thing.
Is that something we can rule on?
It's compliant with the legislation we use on conditions, unfortunately. Obviously, if it is something that's then coming over to the Borough Council to take on and maintain, then that's something that the Borough Council can look at. But obviously there are other sites as well that do go over to management companies, sometimes resident management companies, and again it will be, it's not the sort of thing that we can condition, unfortunately.
Contract, which then specifies how many cuts for each site per year, and the ground maintenance contract from memory is due to be looked at in the not too distant future anyway, because we are now coming to the end of the original contract and then looking at about what we do moving forward, whether we extend or otherwise. But that is the opportunity if we want to. And also, don't forget, variations of contracts do also involve money. Whether we look at varying the terms and conditions of what's actually in the grounds maintenance contract. So that, I don't think it would be planning, it would have to be through the GM.
Yeah.
I see no other members wishing to speak. Okay, so thank you very much for that. We note the report. Moving on to item number 8, which is the Nuneaton Business Improvement District. And we have Jonathan, please.
I've just submitted the report that outlines the proposed business improvement district for Nuneaton Town Centre. I won't go through the report step by step, but effectively what you've got within the report is an outline of what a business improvement district is, how it functions and what the aims of that are. I think it is important to stress that this is very much a business-led group and will be run by the local businesses to deliver improvements for the area of benefit, which is the area within the business improvement district itself. In terms of our own obligations, we obviously have premises within that area of benefit, which have a rateable value, and the way that funds are raised for the projects that the businesses have outlined as priorities is through a levy on the business rates. The proposal that they put forward is a 2% levy, so we will be paying 2% levy on the rateable value of the properties that we own within the area of benefit, and those are the properties that actually apply to us. They're outlined on the back of the report for you by list. So that does include car parks as well as physical premises, including the town hall, etc. The bid will now be going to a formal ballot. The businesses that are included within the area of benefit will be starting, if not already, to get notification of the ballot, which is a postal ballot run by Civica. And that will run for 4 weeks as a postal ballot. If by number and by rateable value of the total that are voted is a majority in favour of supporting the bid, then the bid becomes effectively a legal entity. There is some work for then the bid steering group to do in terms of forming a formal company, and they have to enter into an operating agreement with ourselves for the collection of the bid funds through our revenues department. That is then ring-fenced for the bid to draw down to deliver the projects they have outlined within their proposal. Each year, the bid group then has to submit an annual report to say how they have spent those funds in terms of delivering the projects and outline those financially, which are issued then to all of the businesses within the area of benefit. The term will be a 5-year term. At the end of that 5-year term, they have to submit a further business plan for the businesses to consider and vote on if they want it to continue to move forward. Locally, there are a number of bids. Stratford-upon-Avon, Leamington Spa, Hinckley have all got business improvement districts which have been going for a number of years now, and I think Hinckley is now in its 4th 5-year tender. So they are obviously, in terms of the bid here, it's looking at raising about £5 million. Sorry, not £5 million, £1 million over the... No, right, it is 5 million, is it? I've got it here, actually. It's about £273,000 a year the levy will bring in. So that will, like I say, be just over £1 million, yeah. For them to deliver the projects that have been outlined within the business plan. And you'll see that those really consist of 4 key headings. And those probably are the ones that, you know, it's important to just to sort of read through and have a look at and see that, you know, you can see that they'll add value. And effectively the bid can only really, it can't replace existing services that the local authority provide. It can only add additional value to that on top of. So it's not an opportunity for the local authorities to look at reducing their expenditure within certain projects. The bid will add additional value to those if it considers that it wants to spend money within those. But it can also obviously do things that aren't within our remit, such as levels of a lot more sort of marketing and promotion that really isn't within our remit to do in terms of what we deliver. So, like I say, you know, it's now up to the businesses to vote and support the project. There's been a lot of consultation done over the last 3 or 4 years, which was sadly interrupted by the pandemic. But again, the consultation that has been undertaken is outlined within the business plan for all the businesses to say, and all of those businesses who are eligible to vote will get a copy of the final, which is highlighted in here, the final business plan, which has now been printed and hard copies are being distributed to the businesses. Thank you.
Thank you.
Domain, because it is something I want to talk about, and it's not a black and white issue, because it clearly has massive potential advantage for our town to, or Nuneaton I should say, because obviously Bedworth one hasn't come along yet. It's obviously got massive potential, but obviously there are various issues and questions that need asking, particularly in terms of the bid area. You know, is it fair that certain areas pay? You know, our car parks will pay to be in the bid, and the new NPC car park won't, because it's on the wrong side of the road. So there's lots of things like that, and the Asda and Sainsbury's car parks, they don't even pay business rates from what I can tell. So there's lots of issues about it being a tax on the businesses inside the ring road and how it goes on with those around. But it is also an opportunity, and one of the things we have is quite a scruffy town centre. Lots of things like the maps, and the maps still show the toilets that aren't there, and Abbey Street car park things. So if the bid's going to be actually providing positive messages as you come into town and doing some of this stuff that we've let slide, that'd be very positive. We obviously are a big part of paying into the bid. If we're paying 20,000 and they raise 100,000 or whatever, 200,000, we're paying maybe 10% of the cost of the bids. So I don't know if we have a seat on the bid board, but also going forward with a hotel being built and maybe a cinema being built, that will then add maybe to our liabilities, or will it be Hilton's liabilities? So I think there's things that we need to just bottom out. But unlike what's said on social media, I am keen on us having a bid, but I'm quite keen on it working well. And one of the final things is the page in the documents about the bid team isn't there. I'd be most interested. It'd be nice actually if the bid team presents one today, but it'd be nice to sort of see what mix of people are driving the bid, because if they're actually really active people, a few really good active shops in town that have been very active promoting the town, but also there'll be people who are sort of like sitting partners or just sort of own something through their Luxembourg company or whatever. So I'm interested to know who's running the bid in terms of the bid team. Thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
Chair, just to pick up on some of the points which have been raised. Yes, I am pleased that it's in the public domain now. I would have liked to put it in the public domain at Cabinet, but it wasn't my document to put out. And as Councillor Condacore will see, because others won't have seen it, councillors can see it on the pink papers. The final version, which you have, is now complete, whereas the version which was at Cabinet wasn't, so it wouldn't have been fair to put out in the public something which wasn't finished. The Cabinet report does specifically say, and I had this recommendation added specifically to say, that if Bedworth wants to come forward with a business improvement district, then we will give them that support. But to date, there hasn't been that interest, if you like, from the local businesses, and we have gone out to the local businesses, haven't we? And I've spoken to some of them to say that, but it's important to note that most of this is actually bid-led, local businesses-led. It isn't us. Well, we do push along where we can, but in terms of the foundations of it and the work that goes with it, it has to be led by the business teams themselves. When it comes to boundaries, you're never going to please anyone. It's where do you draw the line? And I think the boundaries were drawn by the bid team themselves, not us. So it's down to them. But wherever you draw the line, someone's going to be happy and someone's not going to be happy. You've got to make a decision somewhere. There will be a seat on the board for the council. I can confirm that. And the plan is that it will be depending on when the company actually takes over, it will be myself as leader, and then it will become an annual appointment at council in the usual manner of things, as appointment by office, etc., for other things. So that's what would happen there. And in terms of the rates, Councillor Condacor is right. It will be a moving feast for the council, but because as the regeneration ebbs and flows, we will have buildings coming online and some buildings being decommissioned. So that will inevitably impact on the rates that we will be paying. But for just over £20,000 that we're putting in, because we are a large owner in the town centre, but not the largest. Contrary to popular belief, we don't own everything in the town centre as much as people would like to think we do, so that we can lower the rents. It will give additionality, and I think that's key here. It's stuff above and beyond what the council can do. So we will have to sign a basic agreement about the services that we will provide, which is the baseline, and then they can top up. So if they decide that they want to put in additional CCTV beyond what we provide, then they can do that. If they want to put in street pastors or monitors or all that sort of thing, they will be able to do that themselves to help with that. I go into Birmingham a bit for work, and they have a few business improvement districts in the city centre because it's very large. A lot of them put flower beds in themselves, or saying sponsored by Birmingham Bid or whichever part of Birmingham it is. So I think it's a great opportunity to provide additionality to the town centre that we can't necessarily do, but we are perfectly happy to work in partnership with the businesses which have come forward and done a lot of the donkey work on this, and I think we ought to thank them for that, because it has been a difficult task. At one point they did lose the chair of the bid, and we were scratching our heads, I think, to try and find someone to try and take the reins to drive it forward, because it couldn't be us, not easily anyway, and it would only have been an interim measure. But really we want this to be led by business and those in the town centre, because they know their business, they know their market, and what could be done to help improve things, because we only have so much capacity. So those are the things which were in the mind of Cabinet and myself as the portfolio holder when we were looking at this. But I thought it was also key to give that commitment to Bedworth, that if they do want to drive it forward themselves, then we will give that equal amount of support.
Anybody else wishing to speak on the matter? I'd just like to add myself. I thank for the fact that, as you say, that Bedworth as the town will have the opportunity, if they wish, to join. Obviously, once they see the benefits thereof, from if this goes ahead in Nuneaton, and they can see the benefits, I'm sure the traders, the business owners, etc. in the town will then think secondly about it and think, well, perhaps we could get a benefit out of it. I can see a lot of benefits for it. I appreciate what Councillor Condacor has said, and again what Councillor Wilson has said regarding where do you draw the line, the physical line, as in the border line, the outside border line. And looking at the map, the proposal map, it would seem fairly logical, to be fair. Basically using the ring road in the main as the encompassed area. So that seems to be fairly acceptable and reasonable from my point of view. And the fact that they have the opportunity to top up the services that we provide as a council. And of course we have limited resources, as we all know, and we have to share those limited resources around a lot of different services. And some, in all fairness, we would like to spend more money on, but we haven't got that money. So we need to balance our books accordingly and take the priorities and spend our money wisely. But if the bid company can put forward monies for certain aspects which they think would be a benefit, I can only see that to be as a good thing going forward. We're not in a position, I don't believe we don't need to vote on this, do we? It's just a noting the report. Would you like to say anything else, Jonathan?
Boundaries as well. There's the bid can, any business that is outside of the bid area, within a reasonable area, can obviously decide to make voluntary contributions to the bid to become part of their membership. They wouldn't therefore vote in any further submissions of business plans or what have you, but a lot of bids do take voluntary contributions from businesses either just on the periphery of the proposed business improvement district, or people that just can see the benefit from it and believe that it's in their best interest to be part of it as well. So there's opportunities for them to raise additional funds there as well, and to apply for grants that perhaps we're not in a position to apply for as a local authority. So they are quite successful in raising additional funds above and beyond the bid levy itself. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that something that's commonplace at that level, or is it something that the bid organisers have put forward?
It was obviously submitted in terms of the proposal by the group here. The bid levies are on average from 1.5%, 2%, 2.5%, around that level. They don't go. There are business improvement districts that have higher. There are some that do it on a banding system, but a percentage system seems to be the most common way of doing it, and 2% seems to be about the standard at the moment. So it's it's what you would expect, to be honest.
Those with a lower rateable value, the below the 5,000, they're coming in as part of, but without any cost factors to them. Obviously, if they're smaller businesses, they've got smaller turnovers, one would imagine. Yeah, thank you. In which case, we note that report. Thank you very much. We now move forward to item number 9, which is the integrated performance report for the second quarter 23 to 24, and that's Steve Gore. We're just transferring over.
Yeah, I'm here, Chair, if you can hear me.
Where are you, Steve? Thank you.
Okay. So the summary for the second quarter, starting with Appendix A, finance linked to performance. Of the 7 measures within the remit of the panel, the trend shows that 1 has improved, 4 declined, and 2 have stayed the same. The 4 declined measures are market stalls hired in Bedworth, Bedworth town centre footfall, car park ticket income, and the average time to process planning applications. Moving on to Appendix B, the strategic risk register. The 3 risks within the remit of the panel, 1 is net red, 1 net amber, and 1 net green. Net meaning given the mitigations that are in place. The net red risk is failure to maintain the economic vibrancy of the borough and town centres. And the net amber risk is failure to deliver and refresh the key elements of the Building a Better Borough corporate plan. The key changes that have been highlighted this time are R4, economic vibrancy. A planned action has been added regarding the new borough plan provision to support and protect town centres and businesses in terms of redevelopment. And a new risk has been added, R27, which is arson or accidental fire in corporate buildings. This replaces the previous risk that combined corporate and housing complexes. A separate risk for housing areas such as flats complexes and so on, general purpose sheltered accommodation, that's covered within the housing OSP. Appendix C, the Strategic Performance Report Executive Summary. There are 19 measures, 12 of which are green, 3 are red and 4 are amber. The red and amber risks which are shown under areas for improvement are general fund revenue, general fund capital, working days lost to short-term sickness absence, working days lost to long-term sickness absence, short-term return to work interview compliance within 3 days, and the number of annual development reviews completed. I should also say that the rent collection figure at the end of the second quarter was not available as there's an ongoing data quality validation check. In terms of Appendix D, freedom of information and environmental requests, the summary shows that 396 were received, 396 were completed, and 82 were late. That is outside the 20-day response time. None were outstanding. In relation to member inquiry forms, there were 257 submitted by the end of the second quarter. And finally, Appendix E complaints, the summary shows that 847 were received, 841 were completed, 98 were late, that's outside the 10-day response time, and 6 were outstanding. And that completes the summary, Chair.
Thank you, Steve. Councillor Condacor.
Thank you, panel. But one thing we noticed on the housing panel was a lot of the second quarter outturns didn't make any sense. The numbers didn't seem to be right or plausible. For a good example would be on page 36, which is a car parking. So you've got a budget for the year of £340,000, not £340 million, because that's another error. We've got triple zeros at the top. But the second quarter outturn is really tiny. And it doesn't seem that some of these middle figures on these tables, the second quarter outturns, are actually plausible. And a few of the other numbers seem a bit strange as well. Some of them seem sensible, yeah. The halfway through the year is about in the middle of half a year's worth. But not all these figures seem very sensible. The other thing I wanted to speak about today was planning delays. 'Cause obviously, it's very good we've got the planning application for the pull through in Bedworth very quickly, but I hope that we're still making progress and cutting the delays, because I'm not seeing much on the planning weekly list. And obviously, we only enter things on this system of how long a planning application took once it's determined. So I think some idea what the backlog of undetermined applications is would be useful. Thank you, Chair.
Would you like to respond to any of those questions, Steve?
Well, the one I can respond to is and apologise for the confusion, is on all three OSPs this time. I think the actual figures we used, given that Councillor Condacor has questioned some, and not as stated by the head of the column where it says thousands. So we'll correct that. We'll get it one way or the other for the next quarter. So apologies for that.
Yes, Councillor Condacor.
That you, it's 38,000 for the figure in the middle, and that doesn't seem plausible, even if we ignore the 3 extra zeros. So I was asking for some of these figures to be checked, because 340,000 is, and these are, the other thing is these are actually annual costs. So actually these numbers are actually negative to us. Yeah, it costs us effectively 340,000 to run the car parks with the budget. 199,000 is the end of year, and yet we seem to be only at 38,000 halfway through the year. Doesn't sound right.
If you could look into that for us then, please, Steve, and get an answer on that one. I can see what Councillor Condacor is talking about. There's quite a discrepancy.
I did understand that the councillor had questioned certain figures, but obviously I can't comment in any detail on those. But there is already some ongoing correspondence between the finance manager and the councillor. But yeah, we'll have to look into those. If there are errors, we'll come back and let you know next time.
Thank you, Steve. Any further questions from the floor regarding anything within the report? There's one thing I want to ask. Bear me a second. Where's he gone? Ah, yes. On the report on footfall in both towns, which is page 34 of our report, we've got the figures obviously for the footfall for the previous year. If we look at Nuneaton, for example, 1.5 million roughly speaking, this year 1.8. The profile target at 2.125. But if you look across, that seems reasonable. We look across at Bedworth, and we've got 395, 365 roughly, but then your profile is right up at 575. Where does the profile figures come from, and why have we got such a differencing between Nuneaton, what expectant, and Bedworth, what's expected?
Well, the profiles come from the manager, and possibly, it's based on what he sees is going to happen during the year and what have you. And maybe he was more optimistic that things would get back to a more normal thing, with all the online shopping, etc., that seems to have taken a lot of people from the town centres. But I can go back to the manager concerned and ask the question.
I think these are pre-pandemic figures. So what the profiled figure was pre-pandemic. I'm trying to think back over the course of a number of reports here, Chair. I think it's fair to say that the town centres, whilst they have recovered to an extent, that we are still feeling the impact of the pandemic, and there are some shops which have closed in the town centres, not necessarily in our ownership, so they wouldn't figure on, our void rate, but it has happened, and we haven't had new people take them over yet, or the owners haven't been able to successfully market them, so that will have an impact on the footfall figures too. But myself and Jonathan just had a quick exchange, and we do believe it is a pre-pandemic figure.
Member wishing to speak on this item or question anything within the report? I'm seeing no one. In which case, I thank you very much, everybody, and thank you, Steve, for your report.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, we move forward then on to item number 10, which is the annual report from this committee, 23-24. It's there for noting purposes, but as you can see, it's a listing of the various items that have been discussed at the various meetings that have taken place so far within the year. Okay, happy with that? Again, for noting, we have the item number 11. We move forward to page 80. This is the forward plan for the OSP committees, etc., all of which have been identified on the right-hand column, and obviously those appropriate to this meeting. Again, there for noting purposes. Item number 12, page 89 within your agenda. Is the work programme following on, which includes the following next meeting, which is April. Nothing untoward on that one, I can see. Everybody happy with that? Again, noting purposes. And item number 13, any other business? I don't have any other business. Anybody wish to raise any other business? No. Councillor Cape.
Memory kind of fading a bit, but I seem to remember that when you so admirably chaired the oversight panel in the past, when the Armed Forces Covenant came up, you actually made a comment that a meeting should be held within a year for oversight. Great to say that Nuneaton did re-accredit for the Armed Forces Covenant, but that work stream seems to have lost its way somewhat, that it's not been formalised, and I just wondered if we could review what's happening on it.
Thank you. In which case, I shall call this meeting to an end. I thank you for your time and